I'm Nicole Carter and very pleased that you've joined us for this session in the DWG Institute's educational schedule, where our mission is to guide you in your technology evaluation journey. I'm here with my co-host, Andrea Brandt, and with the support from many of our DWG team spread across 2 continents. Our topic today looks at the post-pandemic workplace and how organizations will need to find new ways to keep employees connected to the tools they need to do their job whilst hybrid working. We are joined by our partners Workgrid, along with the AES Corporation, to share exclusive insights into how they have used the Workgrid platform to empower today's workforce. We will see how Workgrid integrates with MS Teams to be the catalyst to a modern employee experience, designed to keep everyone engaged, informed, and productive. It can also extend into the collaboration environment, including both desktop and mobile. Next, the AES Corporation will share how they've developed and implemented their digital workplace strategy using Workgrid and integrating other major software platforms, including Microsoft, Workday, SAP, and ServiceNow, which I know that a lot of people and a lot of our members and a lot of people on this call will be interested in hearing. However, before we begin our discussions, I'll hand things over to our technical producer, Rose Miller, to make sure everyone is set up comfortably with WebEx.
Thanks, Nicole. That sounds very exciting. Looking forward to today's session. And just before we get going, we're using WebEx today, of course. So just a few navigational tips to make sure we get the best out of the next hour together. We advise that you set the WebEx to full screen, which you can do by clicking on the floating panel view icon in the top right of your screen there. And if you'd like to view the participant list and chat, as well as the presentation side by side, you can click the side-by-side view icon, which is also in the top right there. We would love to hear from you today. So if you'd like to get involved in the conversation with any questions or insights, you can just put your question into the chat panel. Just make sure it's set to everyone there. And we'll bring that into the conversation through our hosts, or we could ask you to come off mute to speak to your question if you would like to. And if you are coming off mute, there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can click on the unmute button at the bottom of your screen or next to your name in the participant list. If you need any help during the session, you can just click on my name in the participant list and just right click there and chat to me directly, and I'll help you out with whatever you might need. And finally, just to flag that we are recording today's session and all the material presented will remain strictly confidential. With that, I'll hand back to you, Nicole, to introduce our guests today. I just on mute, Nicole. Oops, still mute. I'm just gonna.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes,
yes, we can.
Good. So we try to make the DWG Institute events interactive, yet we also want to learn from our expert experienced guests. So we do have to strike a balance. Today, our main session will be 1 hour long, covering quite a bit of ground and featuring 2 different speakers. So to manage the timing and the flow of the program, we invite you to engage in the chat panel with each other, with us, and with DWG's Executive Director, Ed Taylor. We will answer some questions directly in the chat panel and some in the Q&A portions of the program, including the optional overtime session, which follows directly after the main event. So if you are able to stay on for the first hour, you'll have an opportunity, or longer than the first hour, you'll have an opportunity to go a bit deeper into these topics, ask more questions specific to what Workgrid can do for you, or anything related to the digital workplace that you'd like to share or get some insights on. So let's get started. Over to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Nicole. So this morning, well, it could be afternoon for you, we're going to kick it off with Troy Campano. So Troy's the Chief Product Officer at Workgrid, and he's going to be bringing in Angie Wyatt, who's the Director of the Global Digital Workplace Experience at the AES Corporation. And the 2 of them are going to talk a little bit. Angie's going to share about her experience and share her insight about using Workgrid. So with that, Troy, I want to kick it over to you. Are you able to share your screen and come on camera?
Sure, yeah. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. And I think I just need to be enabled to share.
Seeing that capability?
It's grayed out for me at the moment. There it goes.
There we go.
share my screen. And
The WebEx hamsters are on the West Coast. We're still waking up over here.
there we go.
Looks
Are you
great,
able to see my
Troy.
screen?
Yeah, it looks great, and we can hear you. Take it away.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Troy Campano from Workgrid. I'm excited to talk to you today about the digital workplace of the future, focus on people and unifying technology. And the world continues to change. Transformation, employee experience struggles considering many different macro factors, including today what is the policy for employees in and out of the office. This is a sort of a moving thing all the time. I know it has been for us and for many others. There's this massive shift towards remote work, something we've been talking about for years, and it's something that is here. Many organizations completely 100% remote now as part of the pandemic, and this shift towards hybrid working. However, we think there's a better way of working, and so Workgrid extends and optimizes your employee experience across your entire stack to be able to connect your people, your information, all within a seamless experience layer, bringing all of that together for you. And so the way that Workgrid works is that it can connect into all of those systems that your employees use, and it extracts that news, that information, the content, the communications, workflow, and those transactions for your employees. And it's able to orchestrate all of that together to go across employee touch points. So where do you want to surface that within your digital workplace? And today with Workgrid, that can be within your intranet. That could be on a desktop app, a mobile app. And today what I'll show you is something that we're working on, which is Microsoft Teams. So extending Workgrid into Microsoft Teams to be able to meet employees where they work. This is something that's in our roadmap. The early version of this is coming out next quarter. And so I'll just show you what's in flight today and what our teams are working on. And so employees today, over 70% of them have more than 5 applications open. And there's just a huge amount of applications that employees are expected to use, creating this sort of app explosion. And this has gotten worse with remote working, right? So now everything, your workspace that's digital, everything is through these apps that you're using today. And this has given significant rise to platforms like Microsoft Teams, as well as Slack. And one of the things that we've realized, both ourselves and working with our customers and our prospects, is that as organizations through the pandemic rapidly rolled out Microsoft Teams and started to enable a number of different apps, there's this sort of theme of app sprawl, that there's too many apps, too many things sort of all reaching out to you. And this is exactly what Workgrid solves for, both within the intranet and mobile, and now within Microsoft Teams. And as employees are increasingly spending less time on maybe a traditional intranet and spending more of their day now in these tools like Microsoft Teams, how do you reach them within your digital workplace when so much time is spent in these different channels? And so that's why we're working on Workgrid for Microsoft Teams, and that's why this is coming out next quarter. And so this will provide for organizations the ability to reach and engage your employees with communication. So if you want to be able to reach your employees where they're working, with announcements, with communications, with information, you'll be able to do that through Microsoft Teams. And it also allows you to optimize your digital workplace. So sort of orchestrate across all those things that the employees are using and bring it to them versus the employee having to go out to 12 different systems, ultimately being able to boost productivity. So here's a sneak peek of what it looks like. You'll have the ability to fully brand this, but this is an example of sending communications out to your employee, being able to send notifications, announcements, information. Here's transactions. This is an Oracle procurement request where you can see the details of that transaction all here within Microsoft Teams. And then this is an actual demo from our environment. What you'll see here in the bottom right is you'll see a notification pop up. You'll see that I was sent information. It'll say you've received the new Concur notification. In this case, it's a Concur expense approval. I can click on toggle detail here, view the details of this transaction all within Microsoft Teams. I can view the information I need to approve or reject. In this case, I'll approve it. And then you can see within inline, you see that approval happen, and Workgrid takes care of that orchestration behind the scenes. Next, this is sort of a demo environment for us. I'll type notifications, And you'll be able to see some example communications that can be surfaced here within Microsoft Teams. And because I have access to many environments, you'll see some of our production notifications. So here, this is the kind of thing that you can reach out to your employees where they're working with information and communications. You'll be able to publish information, those announcements that you might want to push out, and actually reach the employee where they are, where they're working. And what's important here is that within the chat, you need to be able to badge the employee. So you might be able to see on the left, you've got the little red circle with the one to indicate that there's something new there. And we found that that is super critical so that the employee knows that there's information available to them. So that's our Microsoft Teams integration that we're super excited about. It's really one of the first journeys for us, extending beyond the intranet and mobile and really meeting employees where they are. And where we like to go with it is additional channels like Slack, potentially even Salesforce, and continue that journey of meeting employees, embedding that information where they work as a part of their digital workplace.
Troy, will people be able to ask you more questions about that in the overtime session at the end if they're particularly interested in that?
Yes, definitely. So I'll be around to the end. If you have questions about this, feel free to hang out and ask after the presentation. And then with that, I'm going to kick it over to Angie Wyatt, who will share AES's digital workplace journey and how they're leveraging Workgrid within their enterprise as well. Over to you, Angie.
Great. All right. I think I need my share button on great as well.
Great. Sorry, Angie. We'll just do that now. There you go.
Okay, just give me a moment. Okay, can you see my screen?
You can,
Yes,
it
we
looks
can.
great.
Excellent. So thank you for the great overview, Troy, and for the introduction. And thank you, Workgrid and DWG, for the opportunity to share a little bit about the AES story. I certainly have been following the integration to Teams very closely. My team is very excited about that, and I think we asked Troy, we would every day if we had the opportunity, but certainly very exciting. So, but to share a little bit about where we're at right now and in our journey, what we learned pre-COVID or during COVID is that we know that we can deliver functional remote experience for people, and really we needed to decide now what's next. What's that next level of success that's going to mean to help us unlock the holistic needs of our workforce? And we're learning as we go. So I think that one thing that we've learned is that we're always learning. So we're going to give you a little sneak peek here. So with Office 365, that really helped us at AES remove technical barriers. We had legacy acquisitions of companies across the globe, and it was really difficult to collaborate and communicate beyond email. So Office 365 really helped us with that, and we certainly had a quick adoption of that. We know everyone's connected anytime, anywhere, any device, and we sat back and thought, now, what's next? What's missing? So we all know that our industry, everybody in the globe is becoming more people-centric, more digital. And we realized that in our digital journey, we weren't maybe necessarily doing it on purpose. We were saying it was our digital experience, but it's just a combination of what we had. So what we're doing now is we realize we need to shift our focus from technical back to human and discover what's most important to our people. So really having an experience on purpose. And now we're sitting there saying, what's next? So over the past few months, we've been able to partner with our HR and communications team, which has been integral to have that trifecta of powers, if you will, between digital team, HR, and communications to develop the personas together. There was really too much overlap to say we were going to develop our own digital personas and then have communications and HR have their own set. So really working with them to collaboratively come up with what are the personas for AES. And with those personas, we'll be able to identify those journeys and their digital touch points. Once we have those, now we are going to be able to step back and say, what's changed since we originally came to what we thought was our experience? and what opportunities do we have to implement those solutions to optimize our people engagement. So now we're connecting the dots. That's going to help us define our new reality and our people experience. Being able to make sure that, like I said, we know everyone's connected, but we really want to put the knowledge and expertise to work, and we want to make sure that we're balancing productivity and well-being. That's something with the new hybrid workforce we're hearing more and more about. People are burnt out, they're on overload. So how to balance technology with productivity and well-being at the same time. So back to that, like I said, we had all of this on experience, or all of these applications are something that we have these digital platforms. We've invested a lot of time, effort, money, training into helping people optimize how they use these enterprise applications. What we've been able to do with Workgrid is we're seeing that we're being able to bring that together with communications, notifications, and tasks to, as Troy said, taking it where people are working. So bringing these systems together, it's really going to help us explode the interconnections and helping people maximize their journey so that they aren't frustrated, removing that friction and helping them have that more consumer-like experience while they're at work. So while we have many use cases, we had to focus our initial impact to provide some initial benefit and excitement to really get the team behind us so that we could have their continued partnership as we identify additional work use cases. So today we have a little sneak peek of what we've identified as our initial use cases, and we'll give you a little demonstration of that. Okay, so here is an example. When we talk about doing this on the intranet, but here's an example of where our communications team will be able to provide access to people, taking them out to the internet. And this is a quick video, I'm so sorry about that. Coming back and be able to delete those. Now I'm in a ServiceNow notification. So this is coming from a system issued notification. And again, helping people find what's relevant to them, getting things what they need to know, where they're working at, and not just having it get lost in their inbox. Now this one is, here's an example, I think I clicked twice. Here's an example of our pulse survey. And this one is one of my absolute favorites. So it's an example of where our comms and HR team can do a quick pulse survey. This one, how are people feeling? How are they doing? Do they need anything? And this gives them the immediate results back to those analytics, back to getting to people where they're at without having another email notification that gets lost in the shuffle, and letting HR know who's opened it and what are the analytics on that. And here we have an example of, I've already approved a procurement request, an expense report. I've got now a ServiceNow request. I'm going to actually do a rejection on this one. So somebody's asking for a laptop. It's Lauren. She's always asking for laptops. And I can reject that. And then this is just another example of if you had those piled up, you'd be able to, again, have all of those systems come to you at the same place. And right now, these are coming in through our intranet, through our home sites that we've developed. But as Troy said, we're super excited about how we're going to be able to connect those dots back into Teams going forward. So right now what we have is we're working on the communication campaign for our pilot, and that's going to go out to our Brazil users. We've got the intranet home site, communication survey, Ariba interfaces, Concur, and ServiceNow ready to go. We've got additional use cases with ADP payslips, Workday Learning to help people know when they've got mandatory training, and Power BI so that we can push relevant dashboards to people. Again, all in that same space without going out and finding where it's at and remembering how to get to it. So again, these use cases were just glaring to be connected. And our team is going to get this pilot off the launch pad and then go into our global production. And again, in parallel, we're reflecting back already on let's relook at those personas, relook at those additional use cases, and see how has the hybrid environment changed how we're working. So we know that those journeys and the, identifying those other touch points are out there waiting for us, and we're going to get these underway and circle back around again to find out what's next.
Angie, this is Andrea. Can you go back just to give people a chance to kind of take it all in to your homepage? And so let me just set the stage to make sure everyone's following along on your story, because Troy talked about Teams is coming. So for right now, what you've done is you've got your SharePoint intranet. And are you on SharePoint Modern?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got your SharePoint intranet, and then you've got the Workgrid Toolbar running down the left. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we've got the Workgrid Toolbar here, and then this is the modern SharePoint home sites.
Okay, and
really,
so
the easy widgets we added right in. So the digital team did this pretty much on our own and didn't really even have a designer or developer come and help us. When we're pulling real content from our site that's relevant to me, because this is my homepage.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about I know you showed your slide with all of the systems and solutions that you have, the third-party applications. I'm sure lots of people on the call are resonating with that because they're living that same digital landscape every day. Were you looking to solve for all of them at some point, or did you match up a couple of the key platforms with the personas that were most needed? How did you kind of decide which ones to implement first?
I think it's a combination of what was most ready, what was most glaring, and where we could work quickly with the application owners to get that buy-in. So again, we really needed to get the support of the technical team and get them excited about what the art of the possible is. So some have been a little faster to adopt that. So ServiceNow was our first use case in there. We've got we just rolled out ServiceNow. And that was a great opportunity for us to help identify ways that we can, improve the adoption, get it to where people are working. That team was ready and available to help us. So it really was a combination of working with the business and making sure we had the right use cases to get the right excitement.
That's great. And we actually have a question from Stefan. He's wondering if you can expand on the difference between to know and to do and how you differentiate between those.
So the to know is where that communication was coming through, whether it be coming from our communications team because they've posted something. So maybe instead of putting a SharePoint site with a link and an email that they send out, it could come through here as a badge and tell us that we've got something we specifically need you to know, and we can target those audiences. The to-dos are more of the approvals or the things where I need to take action, whether it be a survey or whether that's going to be an approval or a review that I need to do.
Great, thank you.
I've got a question, Angie. So when you were talking about getting quite excited about Teams coming, and I can imagine that as well. What do you see your biggest benefits are going to be, or what do you think that's going to give really that people don't have at the moment?
So a lot of the challenge that we have in our campaign is people think now they look at SharePoint as a storage site. This is where we save files. And it was really difficult to say, well, we're going to reinvigorate this home site where people are going to open up their intranet and come to this home site every day. So the excitement about Teams is because our company lives and breathes in Teams. So that is where we communicate, that's where we collaborate. As I mentioned at the beginning of pandemic, it solved many problems that we had from a legacy network environment. So people have very quickly adopted to it. The hybrid environment has even made that even quicker because people are now at home. And with that, when we get that Workgrid integration into there, I think the adoption is just going to be, and the benefits by the people and the application owners is going to be even more evident than it is today. And it really helps us become more omni-channel as well. So whether it's somebody that does live in the internet or somebody that's more mobile, that's something we really haven't talked about, but the mobile experience is as intuitive and integrated as it is here. So I know I'm in the test pilot, and we like to call it the pre-pilot, or the before we go into pilot mode. And I'll get the notifications both on my mobile and on my desktop when I have something to approve. And it's again, it's fun. It takes you to a quick way to review something and approve it, removing friction.
Do you have to have like two separate instances at all of mobile and desktop, or is it sort of seamless between the two, really, do you find?
So Desktop being different than our web version, right? So it's very similar between the iOS version and the internet version, the web.
Okay. Now,
So Angie, you talked, sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was going to ask Troy as well, because a lot of our members, a lot of people on this call will have intranets as well as, you know, maybe thinking of something like Workgrid or Workgrid itself. And it's, is it, would they use that instead of an intranet, or is it always as well as, or is it something that could replace an intranet in the longer term? I think that's a quite interesting question for people too.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll replace an intranet. There's been talk of what comes after an intranet, and there's been talk of that for many years, and nothing's sort of come yet. I think what we're starting to see is a direction of these types of capabilities making their way where the employees are work. So much more embedded where the employees are. That could be part of the intranet, but that can be in other communication channels as well, different applications. Wherever the employee is, sort of that fabric of your digital workplace making its way to you, versus you having to kind of leave and go your own way to, you know, an intranet portal. We can begin to follow you where you work.
And to add to that, the experience between one to the other, where you have that badged notification, whether you're in the web, the mobile, or through Teams, is going to be so intuitive. That's where our users are going to see and reflect that it doesn't matter where they're at, they're going to recognize it and know that where they're at and what they need to do.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. It looks like Stefan has a follow-up question and is happy to come off mute. So can we bring you in, Stefan?
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, question to Angie, or maybe both Angie and Troy. Based on what we were seeing earlier, like that ribbon vertical bar with to do, to know, the apps, and the ask. So if this is part of Workgrid and you imagine integrating all of that into Teams. So Troy earlier was showing us the Workgrid app that will live on Teams. So are you imagining an interface where you'll have multiple layers of vertical ribbons, like starting from the Teams and the Workgrid button, but then if you want to maintain those to do and to know, etc., so the user will have that first level from Teams and then the second level from Workgrid, and so how do you envisage that from an interface standpoint?
That is a really good question. This is a question that our team asked as well. So if Workgrid has those 4 capabilities, how do you bring them into that Teams experience? And so the way that we're approaching it so far is that we're sort of merging together those 4 experiences into a conversation within Microsoft Teams. So our first implementation of this is essentially a chatbot within Microsoft Teams. And so the things that would show up in to know and to do, they're now just showing up within that chatbot. So whether it's a transaction, something for you to approve, or it's a company announcement, it's all showing up in that same stream. One of the things we're starting to explore is beyond that, things like micro apps for your pay slip, your time off balance, KPIs for your Salesforce. Should we embed them within a chat experience as well? So should we keep going down that road if we're successful with that user experience, and ultimately becomes a chatbot? I think the other angle that we're going to explore is that within an app, Microsoft Teams allows you to have some tabs on the top, and we can actually then embed some web experiences. So it might be partially a chatbot, but then it brings you into a deep link into a more web experience. That's something that we can more easily do with Microsoft Teams that we can't necessarily as easily do within Slack. But those are all the different options that we're exploring as this grows.
Troy, could you bring your slide back up where you had the Teams environment, and that way people can look at it again while you're kind of talking through. And I had a question around integration, because I know, Angie, you had said that to get the Workgrid toolbar set up on your intranet was pretty straightforward, and even to have multiple systems feeding in. Is the integration, I know that, you know, it's not available quite yet in Microsoft Teams, but is that expected to be that same level of difficulty or the same skill set that you would need to embed in Teams as well?
I found it, we have a very small team, and we're very agile in that capacity. So we've been able to do it within our any pilots that we've done, we've been able to do with our very small team that is administrators of SharePoint and Teams collectively. It's been very, very easy to work on. I don't know if the team would say that, but I think they make it look very easy.
And Troy, are you expecting that it would be the same type of skill set when people implement within the Teams environment versus SharePoint?
Yes, so you'll need a Teams administrator to be able to just basically turn on the app or upload it, or choose or enable it for your organization within the Microsoft Teams App Store. Yep.
Great. So Stefan, now that we're seeing this screen again, did your question get answered, or do you have further questions?
Yeah, no, I think it's Boyd pointed out the challenges and options that are coming to life, because I kind of like the to do and to know, because mostly they're based on not only different actions that you're expecting the employee to take, but also maybe different sources. So as much as they appear right now in the AES pilot, they may all be consolidated. So it's another way to address that from an employee standpoint and journey. But yeah, this is exciting. Thank you.
I think one of the things we're seeing too, the sprawl that Troy mentioned, because we've already got Workday integrated into our toolbar in Teams, and we've got ServiceNow knocking on the door saying they want to do the same thing. But to the point of app sprawl, how many enterprise applications do you do that separately, and then you still have that unintegrated experience? So being able to bring that all in through a to do and to know, I think, Stefan, is where we see a lot of value, because those actions, our people don't care about which enterprise application they're in. They just need to complete those functions. So to that, they don't need to go to the full application experience.
And what would IT think of it, Angie, in your organization? Did you get the support from them, and was it easy from their point of view as well? I mean, I don't know how integrated your team is with them. I know that varies, and certainly for our members and the people on the call, it would be quite varied. But did they find it quite simple from that integration point of view, the technical integration as well as the from the UI side?
Yeah, I always think everything is going to be super easy and super quick. And I know it does take a little bit more than that, but the team was being able to work through like the API integrations and the different things, and the nuances of our company are different than maybe another company. So not everything is cookie cutter, but we've been able to easily work through all the issues that we've come up against, or the challenges, I guess, not really issues. And we keep pushing Workgrid too. So every time we get to a spot, it's like, well, that may be coming, or something that we're going to work on together as we continue to find additional use cases that we're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. Maybe for Troy, it is like, how much do you share, or when you get your feedback from your clients or your customers, how far ahead do you look at to try and integrate that into the product? Because obviously over the last sort of 18 months, things change so quickly, and I know that one of my other questions was Angie, was to how much things like ramped up or changed over the pandemic period. Did you have to bring things forward? Were you already on this? You're already on this journey, but did you have to speed it up greatly, or you already quite far ahead? And then an associate question is to Troy. How much of that feedback from clients do you feed into the product, or how quickly can you do that? I'll ask Angie's question first then.
I think we were on a path, but the reality was that we learned that we needed to look back and visit, and that's probably something you always need to do. But in this case, it was a significant game changer, right? So the hybrid environment versus how do you train people? How do you connect with people? How do people, we're looking at wellness now as being a priority, and how do we make wellness through digital? So there's different things that we're trying to, it's more important than ever to remove friction and to help people get where they're going and know what they need to know in a timely basis. So I don't want to say we sped things up, but we had to reflect differently on maybe what the priorities were.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Troy, same question to you with a different slant. So that feedback from clients? How quickly can you turn that around, really, or how do you prioritize that from your point of view?
Yeah, Microsoft Teams is a great example. We've actually had in our backlog a Microsoft Teams integration since Microsoft Teams came out. And so what we do is we listen to our customers. We have lots of friends and digital workplace groups across at different companies, and we look for patterns, right? And so when we begin to hear pretty consistently the importance of Microsoft Teams in a digital workplace strategy, how are folks trying to use Teams for communications? I think throughout the pandemic, Teams shot through the roof in its importance, but its importance to communicators and to digital workplace practitioners. And so as we started to hear that very consistently, we started to adapt our strategy this year to really focus on this Teams integration. It's definitely been a game changer.
Yeah, very agile methodology, probably.
Yeah, so Troy, if there's a client who may be a little further out and feeling urgency around a particular integration that maybe, you either haven't gotten to or really isn't, it's more of a niche ask from a particular client. Are they able to customize on the platform and create their own workflows, or how does that work?
Yeah, so our goal from the beginning was for the platform to be an open platform. So we build a lot of integrations ourselves. So if they're the types of integrations like your Oracle and Workdays and Concurs and Aribas, those are things that we'll build for our customers. But if there's something that's very specific to your organization, we have a framework where you can build your own apps. So you can always build your own apps along the way. And so we found that's a pretty good balance of there's so many things that we can do. We can build a lot of those common enterprise apps. You have the ability to build anything else that you want. And then there's this sort of happy medium where we have services groups that can work with you to build those apps that are maybe a little bit more niche to your particular business.
Thanks, Troy. We've got a question about the Workgrid app within Microsoft Teams. So Ashley asks, do you mean the experience is similar to a chatbot, or is it an actual chatbot in that it also could be programmed and trained? I think you had an image of that as well in your slide.
Yeah, so Microsoft Teams has several different ways that you can integrate with it. There's options to add web-based tabs within your channels. The option that we're moving with is what's called a personal app. So a personal app lets you have an icon here that you'll be able to brand with your own company branding. The reason we chose that is because it's front and center, so the employee won't be able to miss it. And the next piece within that personal app, we chose a chatbot because that was one of the few ways within Microsoft Teams to be able to badge on those icons and let you know that there's a new notification. So by having a chat experience here, when there's a new chat conversation that pops up, whether it's a new announcement or a transaction, that's where you'll get the little red circle telling you that there's something there. So that kind of drove us specifically towards that integration option within Microsoft Teams so that we could notify you when there's things that are available for you. The other piece, and I don't know if it's really highlighted here, that you'll be able to see is that as part of this integration, so Workgrid has a chatbot as well. So you can build your own digital workplace chatbot within Workgrid, and there's a whole knowledge part of the system where you can set up questions and answers for the chatbot, and soon you'll be able to integrate with third-party systems all within a chatbot. Our goal is to be able to bring that into this experience as well. And so there's going to be a chat option here, an input box where you can talk to the Workgrid bot, and all of that will be integrated into this Microsoft Teams bot.
You caught me off guard. I was taking a sip of my coffee. That's really cool. So I want to go back to Angie, sort of the pre-work that your team had to do, because obviously, you talked about how things had really picked up pace in terms of adoption and then subsequent sprawl during the pandemic. So how were you able to kind of get your leadership to be willing to take a step back and say, we need to look at what are our personas and solve some use cases and prioritize the things that we're going to go after in some type of order, as opposed to just, trying to do everything at once, which ends up ultimately in probably not a lot getting done.
Yeah,
How
I think
able to manage that.
The interesting case there is, we are just now stepping back and redefining personas. So that's actually something in flight. So coming together and realizing that more needs to happen in this space, and let's revalidate where we're at as we continue to go down this path before we go too much further. So again, there was glaring use cases that we have that we have a list of those that are obvious, and I don't need a persona or a digital touch point to tell me that those are going to add value. But going that next layer deeper, what do people really want? What do they need? And what's going to change the way they work to make sure that we're listening to people and that we're getting that valuable feedback that we didn't necessarily get before through a formal process. And again, became going from glaring to less glaring now, which is, I guess, a good thing. But we really want to sit back and understand as we make these continued improvements, the direction that it's going and align with our overall strategy.
And did you run into any friction with some of these platform owners? I know you talked about having brought in your HR team and your IT team and communications team so that everyone was realizing, each organization doesn't have their own persona. These are AES personas. We are one company, and the employees, while they may have different wants and needs based on their role or how they work, you have to look at them sort of wide ranging. But did you have any sort of pushback or friction from product owners, like Workday as an example? You mentioned that you had that embedded into teams already, and they're like, we don't want to come into this other thing. We're going to stay over here and do our thing.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing was when we integrated showed the demonstration of ServiceNow, the Workgrid or Workday team was all excited about what we were able to do and show with that. So when they saw the first use case actually in action, they realized that, and I just will take a step back. It took a little convincing because they were protective of their area. So they want Workday transactions to happen in Workday. And then there's the realistic view of they have to protect the data. So, you have to be very cautious and have the governance around anything that we do in that space. But being able to see some of those approvals and those flows really got that team more invigorated and excited about coming to the table and vice versa. So I think they're feeding off of each other as well. And, it takes a little coaxing sometimes to get everyone who's very busy to the table. But once we get their attention, we tend to keep it. So that's encouraging.
So that's looking at engagement from the tech side, or the people that are engaged in the actual applications and all the digital workplace elements. But what about the actual user base? How did the adoption, and I'm sure that's ongoing as well, with the adoption, people taking on these new tools or slightly different ways of working, especially with everybody working remotely as well? Is there anything you can share, or any insights or learnings that you've had from that point? Because that's really important.
So our campaign and pilot are getting ready to roll out in the fourth quarter with our Brazil user base. So we won't have the actual feedback from the pilot until we go into the pilot. But within the next month or so, we should have that.
So it sounds like you've made a conscious decision to do a pilot with a smaller subset of employees. Did you choose that particular group of employees because they were sort of the loudest and asking for something like this, or how did you make that decision?
We honestly picked this group because they're most open to embracing change and technology.
Yeah, that's good.
Great. And you know that because you've talked to them, right?
Yes. Again, they are a louder group, but they're always very willing and able to give good feedback, and they're continually looking at new technologies. So it's a very interesting cultural influence when we look across the different countries. So Brazil's usually really open to that, at least in our environment.
And that's good. It's always good to go with that first and get some insights that you can share with everybody else. So that's really helpful.
And excitement.
Right, exactly. And then have them tell two friends, and they're the ambassadors for the program. I know lots of our member companies, and I'm sure others who are on the call today can resonate with, how do you get that buy-in and excitement, not only from the executives, but from the user base. And so this approach that you're taking with a pilot, start a little bit smaller, get some momentum is a great repeatable process that's been shown to be successful.
Yeah. And in our culture, it works really well. So we wanted to stick with what we knew worked, and we're really pushing comms to get this going. We've been, I see Erica's on the call. We have weekly calls talking about where we're at with our communication plan. So we're ready. We just need to get aligned with other communications that we have and changes that we have in our environment. So things that we aren't able to impact, but we're ready to go when the team lines up.
Okay. Can I go back to Troy then and talk about the longer term, any reflections from this case study and other work that you've done, and the actual roadmap itself? And because we've talked about clients are able to feed back into that roadmap, but I'm thinking of, you know, what things you have in the pipeline, or how you're looking ahead as Workgrid to the future. And I don't realize we have to share everything, but it's always good to share in this space anyway.
Yeah, I think some of the things that we're starting to look at is we have some customers who want to bring Workgrid capabilities into other places. So as an example, they might want, as part of their intranet, not to just have Workgrid capabilities in the toolbar, but to also embed them as sort of cards on the intranet page. Or they might already have a notification engine, and so they'd be able to bring those Workgrid notifications and transactions into other places. So that's one thing that we're starting to see. And we're starting work with some of the major intranet players out there to be able to bring that into, it's just as another channel. If you're looking to bring Workgrid into an existing intranet platform, bringing it into those capabilities as well. And then really, as I mentioned earlier, Microsoft Teams is we're starting to expand outside of the intranet, outside of mobile, into other places where you work. So Teams obviously is pretty high on our list. But looking at Slack, looking at other channels of where employees work, what other systems are they using? Can we embed into something like a Salesforce for sales employees? We have some customers that use Workgrid mostly as a way to aggregate things for particular types of employees and people. So as an example, we have an organization that their Salesforce is using Workgrid to aggregate all of the information across their sales systems into a single place. And so being able to embed that into something like a Salesforce platform or some other sales portal is really important. So I think the decoupling Workgrid from sort of that client experience is really important for us, so that Workgrid can embed wherever the employee is.
Okay. Do you think people will suffer from even more notification overload in the future, or do you think that Workgrid's going to try and it's trying to streamline that for people? But
yeah, we're trying not to be another place to go, right? So that's part of that strategy of being where you are, but then also bringing that intelligence so that we can start to organize that information so that it's organized in a way that's meaningful to you, so that it's not communication overload.
that's good.
Yeah, I think to complement that, one of the things that our communications team is very interested in is being able to post a communication and have an end date to that communication. Because when I email somebody, it's going to sit in their inbox forever. But when we post these notifications, we're sending it to people that need to know something. We can track whether they've read it. And then when it becomes no longer relevant, we can actually expire that notification. So we clear that from their queue. So we won't have the 2,000 unread messages that we see in somebody's inbox that never opens up their email, or just likes to gather how many unopened emails they can get. So that's really intriguing for our communications team. And I think something I personally will be welcoming, that I can trust that when I go to this spot, it's something I need to take the moment to look at, because I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time swiping on the inbox on the focused or inbox and focused on my Outlook, because there's so many things that aren't relevant, and I just can delete. So this will take that things I need to know out of that environment, which is becoming just a daily task that I don't look forward to with my morning coffee.
I love this idea about being able to kind of get the clutter out of the inbox, and also being able to track it, because email, unless you click through on something from the email, you really can't track it, because you scan through it, it opens the email, that's a hit back. Either Troy or Angie, can you talk a little bit about the metrics and the analytics that are available to teams on the back end to be able to see things like Angie said, like have they taken action on a notification, have they opened it, etc.
Yeah, we do track whether it's the communication was visible on the screen. So if the notification was visible to you, it came up in your view, you maybe scrolled, you saw it. We do track that. It's not a guarantee that you read it, but it was visible to you on the screen. And then we do track any of the links that are embedded or any of the buttons that are there, whether you clicked on them, so that you can calculate your own engagement rates.
As well as devices, whether it's on my mobile or my web.
Yep.
What about workflows? I know that, well, I think the Workday can offer some help to people there. There's a lot, I know that through our research, we're getting a lot of questions about onboarding, particularly for people working remotely, but onboarding is always that sort of perennial question that comes up. So have you got, is there anything in Workday that can help people with that process, or with that any workflow sort of process that that they're struggling with, really?
There is. So there is a workflow engine that's built into Workgrid, and employee onboarding was one of the core drivers for a lot of the workflow design that's in there today. So if you hire a new employee, you can trigger a workflow based on that. You can notify that employee of things that they need to do. You can look up who their manager is and assign tasks to them as well. So there's a whole task and productivity side to Workgrid as well. That's built into what we call a simple workflow. So the goal here was not to do something super complex that's hard to configure, but it's a trigger. The employee was hired, and then you can attach different actions to that. Can't talk about it just yet, but we have some things coming in the future where we're able to take some of that workflow to the next level, including some of the app development within Workgrid, so you can more easily build apps and workflows directly on the Workgrid platform.
That's really exciting for us. Troy will want to be on the front of that one too.
Angie's raising her hand again.
Our team had presented the workflow for onboarding some time ago to our HR team, and for process improvements, and they were interested, but didn't have time. So interestingly enough, that has circled back, and it came back to us from the HR team that want to revisit that. So we have meetings scheduled yet this week with some of those teams to revisit the workflows and the opportunities with onboarding. So very exciting that the team, that the HR team is thinking of Workgrid as we're looking at solutions. So
that's great.
So I have a question about the onboarding workflow, sort of an interesting pivot on leveraging the tool. So, if I'm sitting here listening to you talking today and thinking, wow, this could solve a lot of my problems, but I don't know where to start. I have a very small team. I have to get buy-in from my executives. I'd love to hear from both of you, because you'll have slightly different perspectives on sort of, and maybe from Angie's perspective, it's like, where did you start with your Workgrid implementation? What was the first, thing that you did, whether it was a workflow or a notification integration, and why? And then Troy, what do you recommend to people as kind of being able to, start small, but really make an impact quickly if they were to implement Workgrid?
I know from my perspective, we were most interested in, the initial, like I said, the glaring cases were those system notifications, communications coming from communications team, and then those quick approvals and reviews that we need to do that take our leaders out of where they're at, which is typically going to today come from email, click a link, go into a system, log in through there, review the process, and do a few clicks in there. So we were able to remove that friction, reduce the clicks to 2 or 3 compared to 5, 6. We can give people back that time. So we were really looking at how we could remove that initial friction, and so those integrations on approvals were just really attractive to us, I guess, from the glaring use cases up front.
And usually we recommend starting small. So with just typical change management, anytime you change anything, somebody's going to push back and say, well, this is the way we've done it, and we like the old way, and folks are a little cautious in the new way. And so by starting small, you remove some of that fear of how things will be. So one of the things that we typically would recommend is starting with approvals, and that's for a couple of reasons. Is to start small, start to surface approvals within the platform. Only add 1 or 2 to start. and you can continue to build on that and momentum. That gets the look, the feel, the experience into people's hands. They can start to see that it's not going to sort of remove how things were done before. There's still the old way available to you, but now we've just made it simpler, right? So we can make it easy, we can make it simple. The other benefit of approvals is that often that impacts managers and executives. And so now that's starting, if you're looking to build executive support, if they can start to approve things quickly and see the platform and use the platform themselves, that just gives them more awareness. It makes it easier for you to be able to move forward.
Did you pick any sort of helpful executives in your Brazil group there, Angie? Did you have a few there that you'd earmarked as part of your pilot?
So not yet. I'm just thinking of the whole country base right now. So I guess yes. But from a overall sponsorship perspective, we do have our global CIO and our VP of HR and VP of communications. So again, that trifecta of leadership that's sponsoring us so that we can bring everybody all together.
Yeah, you're halfway there, aren't you, really? That's good. Yeah. Well, I think we're nearly at time. So I know that was lots of questions and answers there. I hope you feel you weren't being grilled too much there, Troy and Angie. Thanks very much for your great insights and answers to those questions. Thank you to the guests that did put some questions in the chat as well. We have got our overtime session now where people can come off mute if they've got any particular questions for either of our speakers. So feel free to do that. I'm just going to pass over to Andrea to thank everybody.
Sure. So before we flip over to the overtime, which, as Nicole said, if you can stay on and join us, we'd love to have you come off mute and you can ask your questions. We did want to thank Troy and Angie for coming today. It was a really interesting discussion. I know that I speak for the audience when I say lots of resonating themes, and my wheels are turning in terms of how we can help DWG members and others in the community, sort of think about how can we attack this app sprawl, because gosh, that is so real, and just the overload that everyone is experiencing. I did want to talk a little bit about an upcoming event that we have that's going to be open to the public. It's happening in November. It's a 3-day virtual experience, and it is the Nature of Work Live. So this is going to be hosted online from over 3 days and 3 different time zones. So from London, New York, and San Francisco, November 2nd through the 4th. And we're going to be talking about themes that are related to the new book recently released by our CEO, Paul Miller, and our head of knowledge, Shimrit James, called The Nature of Work. So you see the URL there on your screen to register for this event. And with that, I think we're going to shift into our overtime. So if you'd like to stay on. Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, so we're now entering this less formal part of our program where we can chat about just what we've heard and also ask the speakers whatever we want and share our own views too. So we've done a little bit of that already with myself and Andrea, but people can come off mute and just ask any questions that they have. I know that we had Lewis before had his hand up to ask a question. I don't know if that's still relevant or not, but please feel free to come off mute, Lewis, if you would like to ask. Or post in the chat and we can ask it for you. Nope.
And so just to make sure everyone knows, with the overtime session, we don't have any prepared questions at this point. So this is your opportunity to have a little bit more of an informal conversation with Troy and Angie, Nicole and myself. If there are no questions, we can talk about the weather, but.
Yeah, we can close out if everybody's heard everything they need to hear. That's fine as well. That's why it's optional, really. We've done this we do this on most of our Tech Exchange events because sometimes people like to have a deep dive into some of these discussions.
Hello, hi. This is Simon Thompson with DWG. Having a question really about how something like Workgrid, how that changes the way you think about the content that you're actually putting onto the intranet, and particularly when you're relating to things like ServiceNow or other applications.
Great. Is that a question for me or for Angie?
I mean, for anyone really, but
Yeah.
certainly.
One of the things that we find that is great to put in the Workgrid is something that's time bound, any type of thing that's event based, any type of thing where you want to trigger because there's a certain thing coming up or an announcement. Those fit really well into Workgrid. So I want you to know something now, or there's an event coming up. This thing is happening is really important. Fit really well into the stream of events that are occurring within Workgrid. And then we find that over time, you might start to do longer form content or stories that are part of your intranet. So anything longer form where you want to give more background or it's something that people dive into, that fits really great in the intranet. And then more shorter communications, you want people to be aware of something, a particular meeting or something just happened. Those tend to fit more event-based into Workgrid.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, what strikes me is where you've got particularly something like ServiceNow, so you have a particular style of communication, but the more that appears in that Workgrid display, that do you start having to think about how the content on Workgrid is, within ServiceNow is organized?
Yeah, we have it because part of it is that it's very time sensitive. So a lot of these things are transactions that come in, and because they're organized in a way to be very simple, you can complete them right there. So you can just hit, approve, reject, view, sign off, confirm. You're essentially in this mode of triaging the work and then completing it. And instead of you having to go out to 15 different systems to do that, it's all organized in a very simple way for you. So it's all in this sort of hit list. So you can be on mobile, let's say. And back when we used to travel and go into the office more, and maybe some of you do now, you can be on the train in the morning and see all your transactions lined up for you. And then it's, approve, reject, approve. And so those things then disappear, right? Because they've come in, you've seen the information, you've processed it, and then it's gone. Because of that, at least for those transactions, we don't really need to organize them in any special way.
Okay, that gets me thinking about microcopy and making sure that you are able to differentiate between different things, make sure that you understand what kind of activities you're doing, especially when you're doing that mass approve, deny type thing, because you don't want to make any particular mistakes on that.
Right. Yep.
It gets me on down that road of thinking that you need to understand this sort of digital workplace at a much deeper level, because you've got so many new transactions going on at that top level.
Yeah, and one of the things that we do in that to know section, which is more content based, is that there is a category label on each of those notifications that come through. We do have an algorithm that organizes some of the important information at the top based on some of those categories and based on some of the priorities. So when you're sending the communication, you can define some of these parameters, and that causes important things to sort of bubble up to the top, or event-based things. If there's a certain, let's say, event or meeting coming up and it's date-based, it might actually move up in priority as you get closer to that date. We found that it's needed much more to be able to sort of intelligently organize those things in the to know section. But I could definitely see that ending up in the to do section eventually as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, do we have any more questions, or is that us? Have we exhausted everything with our speakers?
Going once, going twice. This is your opportunity. You've got a captive audience. Anybody else? And if you don't feel comfortable coming off mute, you can just put it in the chat pod and we can ask it for you.
No, is that everybody? Okay, shall we call it a wrap, Andrew? So
I'd like to thank everybody.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, and I'd certainly like to thank our speakers. It's been quite a hard hour with us asking you lots of questions, and lots of discussion on the fly, so we can call it a wrap. Thanks for that
Yes.
round of applause, Simon.
Yeah, I know all the new little emojis and hands going up in WebEx. It's great. We do want to get your feedback on this session. We have a survey, which I think, Ed, if you can pop that into the chat, if people want to take that now, and you'll get an email follow-up as well. So please let us know how you found this session. I see the little hands coming up the side. Thank you, Erica. And also keep us posted on topics and technologies that you'd like to hear about. We like to talk about things that are helpful for you in your day job and also give you some ideas about what to think about next. So with that, thanks again, Troy and Angie.